Welcome to The Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to The Plant Report because every plant has a story. My guest today is Dan Jason, writer, farmer, seedsman, and founder and owner of Salt Spring Seeds, a mail-order seed company specializing in heritage and heirloom varieties of seed. Dan is based in Salt Spring Island, British Columbia. Dan is the author of the new book, The Power of Pulses, Saving the World with Peas, Beans, Chickpeas, Favas, and Lentils. Welcome to the show, Dan. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about our subject today, which is a group of plants, pulses. And for those who are listening and think, what are pulses? Can you explain that to listeners?
They are simply the edible seeds of legumes. And legumes are a pretty broad classification, but the ones that we eat are, the most common ones are the ones in the title of the book. Dried peas and beans, chickpeas, favas, and lentils. So it doesn't include those in the, like fresh pea stage or fresh bean stage, just as the dry bean.
Oh, interesting.
So technically, you can call them all beans, but better to use pulses, I think.
And what family is this group of plants in?
That's the Leguminosae, the legumes, and that gives a hint about what makes them so special, actually, because the legumes fix nitrogen. These pulses, these food crops, have the amazing ability to snatch nitrogen right out of the air and put it in the ground. Most gardeners have heard of this nitrogen fixation, and it's an amazing soil association that goes on in the roots of the plants with bacteria in the soil and the nitrogen in the air, and by some magic it happens that the nitrogen comes down into the ground and fertilizes your soil, and you end up having more fertile soil just by growing these crops. And it's the only food crop like that, and it's a pretty special thing. And I've seen year after year, I've often grown my pulses in the same spot, and second year, higher yield, third year, even more. Pretty incredible to watch.
That's unusual, right? With plants adding more to the soil than taking out.
Yeah, almost everything else takes a lot out of the soil. So pulses really are you could say they're the epitome of renewable energy.
I love that. And so where are these plants found around the world?
Any temperate climates. These are pretty common. The ones I picked are the most common. There's lots of other ones like pigeon peas, and sometimes soybeans are classified that way. But these are really common except in tropical and semi-tropical places.
Is there anything you want us to know before we dive into the world of pulses about the history of these plants? Have they been around for a long time?
Well, that's a really great place to start because they have been around, all of them, for 8,000 to 10,000 years at least. And in my book, I kind of give little anecdotal, historical things about them. But they're all very old, and it's important that we keep them going. People all over the planet have been growing them for 10,000 years, and with good reason. And it's important that we realize their value and keep on pulsing with the pulses.
I know, I'm ready to pulse with them. I eat them a lot myself.
Yeah.
But after talking to you, I'm sure I'm going to be incorporating them more into my life. So, Dan, for 30 years, I think that's the right amount of years, you've been growing and talking about and advocating for, it sounds like, pulses. Why? You've mentioned a few things that I think are part of the answer to this question, but why are you so passionate about pulses?
Well, 30 years ago, as you say, that's when I was just getting going. And back then, I was seriously trying to find the very best plants to grow for sustainability, for nutrition, for ease of growing, and kept coming up with these pulses, amongst other things like quinoa, amaranth, a few other crops. But in North America, I found that we're sort of turned off to ordinary beans because we don't really understand how good they can be. Most people buy really old beans in the store that have been sitting around for years and years.
And that take hours to cook. I bought some of those the other day.
Oh, no.
It was the black beans that took 12 hours. Finally, I thought, I am wasting more energy than I'm going to get with these things. So they're composted now. But yes, okay. I think we do get old things in the store sometimes. So go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah. Well, this is a really core point because just like everything else, beans age and oxidize. And what happens to them is they become much less digestible, and that's why people get the farts, and that's why they're almost impossible to digest, and they take such a long time to cook. But other cultures know that beans really aren't like that because they eat them relatively fresh, usually within a year of harvest. And it's an amazing thing to cook up your own beans in less than 50 minutes and have no digesting problems at all. And I've been trying again and again, all my talks and stuff to tell people that, hey, your own homegrown beans won't give you gas.
Wow, that's...
You have to experience it to believe it.
How much land do you need to grow these pulses?
It's not really so much. There's for two of them, your regular beans and your peas, you can have them going up vertical space with trellises and chicken wire and stuff like that, and you can really get a high yield that way. And if you're planting them in rows, for most of the beans, you'll get about, well, I don't know how much this will mean to people, but like 20 pounds for 100 feet of row, which is a pretty good return. And like chickpeas, for example, people think there's only one kind of chickpea, but there's lots of kinds, and most of them give you back 300 to 1. For one seed, you'll get 300 seeds back. And that's pretty awesome. It's in the world of seeds, it's not so remarkable because most things give you even more than that. But still, that's pretty good. 300 return for one seed.
And people are eating. Many people eat pulses, chickpeas in hummus, which is a really popular food.
That is one of the most favorite ways to prepare them. Yeah. Most people, but I'm going to forget to mention this one. Chickpeas are an amazing fresh pea, just the way you shell peas, and nobody in North America practically knows that. When I was traveling in Africa, that was a common sight. Kids by the sides of the roads just selling bunches of chickpeas that are just like our peas, ready to shell, open up and eat just like that. And they're even yummier than regular peas.
Wow, I had never heard of that.
Yeah, they're yummy. They're really good.
Well, that brings me to a question I've had for a long time. Are certain beans, so we buy black beans in the store, we buy our chickpeas, which I've just learned you can eat fresh. Are there certain beans you can't eat fresh and you have to dry, certain pulses, or is there a fresh version you can eat and then a dried version you can eat as well?
All of the above. a lot of fresh green beans and yellow beans aren't really good as a dry bean because they've been, and this is the same with regular peas too, just because they've been bred for eating at the fresh green stage. But there's a lot of exceptions to that. Some are really good anyways if you let them dry down. And then a lot of dry beans, most of the dry beans really that are well known as dry beans, like your red kidneys and your black turtle beans, they aren't good as a fresh green bean. You could eat them at a very early stage and they'd be okay, but they're really much harder to chew and they just don't work that way. So it's just a matter of learning your varieties.
Okay, that makes total sense. And so say that someone listening wants to grow pulses. How do you have to amend the soil to plant them? What do they like? How do they like to grow and what do they like to grow in?
They're really not partial to any, just common ordinary soil is good. But you can buy what are called rhizobium. And it's the bacteria that help this nitrogen fixing process. And the different pulses have different rhizobiums that help them do this nitrogen fixation. But as I was saying earlier, once you get your beans growing in your garden, then you don't have to worry about that anymore because they set up their own process, and it just gets more and more so over the years. And it's an interesting thing. They have the place where all this nitrogen fixing happens is on the roots at spots called nodules. And the different pulses have different colored nodules, and they're little blobby things, but that's where the whole process happens. And after 1 year, you can see much more of them, and after 2 years, way more on the roots. And it's a really neat thing to show kids, or anybody, really.
So the plant is actually like pulling or snatching, I think was your term, the nitrogen out of the air where it's not usable by plants. What is the effect that nitrogen has on plants when it's in the soil in a usable form?
Well, much more fertility. Often people add all kinds of composted manure to their gardens, and that just increases everything, the growing ability and the yields of plants. And that's one of the most important things to have if you're going to grow nice, robust plants is nitrogen in the soil.
And it's amazing that they do it just naturally.
It is amazing.
So you need a bit of space to grow, or you can grow them vertically. And then do you need to feed? It sounds like you don't have to feed them once they're in the ground and they're kind of their own fertilizer factories.
Well said, yeah. Just ordinary garden soil will make them thrive. And if you have rich garden loam, all the better. But they also do well in fairly poor garden soil, or any soil for that matter. And on top of that, once they're going, they need very little water. They're really drought tolerant, which is a fantastic thing for these days when everybody has a water problem.
Is that one reason why I was reading in some articles that you have written that you think that pulses are one of the answers to climate change related concerns about food security?
Totally is, for so many reasons. And this year is the United Nations International Year of Pulses. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet and everywhere about how incredible these crops are. All over the world, people know about pulses. And it's kind of a weird thing that here in Canada, and this goes for the U.S. too, we export vast amounts of pulses to India and China and the Middle East, where they've known and loved them and revered them forever. And we hardly eat any ourselves in North America. It's time we started learning that all around their nutritional value is probably unequaled by anything. Because they have a great combination of protein, vitamins, and minerals, and they're easy to digest, and people don't have allergic reactions, and they're not GMO'd, and they have just so many things going for them. And on top of that, if you're going into a store and buying food, they're the cheapest things that you can buy. Like just about anything else is way more, especially if you're looking at dairy and meat products, they're going to be 5 times as much as getting some lentils.
I've read that pulses are actually a very humane source of high protein for us to eat.
Well, they totally are, because for one thing, we're not taking down jungles and forests everywhere so that we can grow GMO soybeans. These things, we can just eat them directly, and there you have it. And the protein is complete and excellent, and well, there's so little processing that's necessary with them as well. So they're really earth-friendly. So many things about them are earth-friendly.
I know. We love you, Pulses.
Right.
The Pulses fan club here. And I would think, too, that for farmers, this would save money, right? And time. You're not applying a lot of soil amendments. And I would think, too, that Pulses would be a great alternative to factory farming of animals.
Super, super great alternative, yeah.
And so their water needs are low. They're high protein. I've also heard and read that some pulses are, they're nutritional powerhouses and have B vitamins, which are hard to get for vegetarians especially.
They are. They're very high in B vitamins, pretty much all of them. I think lentils are the highest, but they all have really good amounts of B vitamins in them.
And so when should you plant your pulses? It depends on your climate, I assume.
Depends on your climate, but also depends on the pulses. And peas traditionally are fava beans are one of them. And favas, up and down the coast where you and I are, you can plant them even in wintertime. Most people do it in October, and they can overwinter, or you can plant them in early spring. But peas are traditionally planted as soon as the soil warms up so that you're not getting much frost. And here it's often mid-March. And then chickpeas fall soon after. You can almost plant them as early as peas, but maybe a few weeks later would be better. And then the lentils and the regular beans, usually you wait to plant those till the soil is quite warmed up, and that would be around now, early June. Across Canada, May 24th is often the traditional day to plant that kind of warm weather crop.
And how long, and I know this depends on the pulse, but maybe just tell us about a few of them. How long does it take until you get your crop you can harvest?
It's a little bit longer, of course, than eating them fresh. And for your regular pinto and red kidney beans and stuff like that, you'd have, it would probably be, the earliest would be about 90 days. And then they vary a lot. There's some that are quite a bit longer. So if you have a shorter season, you'd try and find the varieties that are short season. And the peas usually take about 3 months. Chickpeas are the longest. They often take about 4 months until they're ready, dry on the plant and ready to harvest. And favas it depends if you're growing them through the winter. It might take a really long time because they'll be slow growing through the winter months, but if you plant them in the spring, it'll probably be about 90 days.
Pretty fast. I mean, it doesn't seem that slow to me to get that crop that you can actually store. How do you dry? Say that you're not going to eat them fresh and you want to dry them. How do you dry them?
You don't have to worry about it pretty much because you just let them dry on the plant. And that's one of the beautiful things about them too. At the end of these 90 days or 120 days if it's chickpeas, that time that I'm referring to means they're totally dried on the plant. So what happens is the leaves all fall off. You're left with just these pods and the beans that rattle in the pods. And a sure way of testing is just to open up one pod and see if your fingernail can dent the bean. And if it can't, they're dry enough.
And then you just store. You can go ahead and store it. Do you have to You don't wash them before you store it. You just put it right in.
No, you don't have to wash them at all. But you do have to figure out a way of threshing them. And fun ways are with people getting together and threshing them by hand, or I should tell you the way I do it now. It's almost as rudimentary as that. You pick them all dry. You have the pods on in an indoor space where every single last one can be dry, and then you just put them in a Rubbermaid or a big wooden box, or you don't even need a box really, except then they'll spread out a little bit too much. But if you just walk on them, they just open up, and so just in a little enclosed space, and you stomp and you do a little dance on them, and they all come out. And then that's quite a thrill because you see all these amazing colors and color patterns. And what I do now is I blow the chaff away. I have a little air compressor that has an air nozzle. But you could just pick the pods by hand, really, because they'll be on the top, and you can just scoop them all off, and then you're just left with the seeds.
Yeah, it sounds easy and fun.
It is really both easy and fun.
And then you can save some of these dried, edible, yummy pulses to plant for next year, I would assume.
You got it. There's no difference, really, Jill, between what you eat, and that's the seed, too. And that's a really cool thing, because with a lot of other things, you have to let the plant go to seed, and the seed isn't your food. But in this case, anything that you don't eat, and you should save some for your next year's planting, then that's your seed. So they're simultaneously food and seed. And you can just store them in, you don't have to do anything special storing them, just keep them dry. That's the most important thing. Keep them out of the light and out of too much heat. And a lot of people just put them in glass jars so they can wink back at you all winter long and remind you of the thrill you had in growing them, and keep that thrill going by looking at them.
And the pulse stomp, too. I love that. Like wine harvest. What was the first pulse that you grew? And did you have an aha moment where you thought, oh, I should plant more of these?
The first ones that I grew are ones that I still keep growing, and I've grown hundreds of different beans over the years, but the early ones were red kidney beans, a white kidney bean, the black turtle beans that I mentioned before, and a few other speckled beans. But the reason things like navy beans and kidney beans and turtle beans are so popular is over the years people have found that they're really suitable for certain things, and like the red kidney beans are great for chili, but you probably wouldn't make a chili with the black turtle beans. You'd probably make them a curry dish or something. And you get to see that the beans have subtly different flavors. Some are richer than others, some are milder and absorb flavors more, and some just stand out on their own. And it's a whole discovery process. But for me, a lot of the first ones that I was growing are still my favorites.
At your seed company, Salt Spring Seeds, people can order some pulses from your website.
They can. It's up there at saltspringseeds.com, Jill, and you can just go online and you'll see the whole range of things that we offer.
And then your book has 50 recipes, I believe, for pulses. Can you share with, and you don't have to give exact measurements, but just share one of those with listeners right now? Like, what's one of your favorite ways to prepare pulses?
Even without going into the recipes, I often, what you do, as most people know, you soak the beans, and overnight is the easiest. And if it's your own beans, you just need 4 hours soaking. And then the next day you simmer them until they're ready. You can add anything to them, and they're going to be great. And you get to know your beans, as I was sort of inferring before, on which ones are best with which condiments and flavors. I often just do a stir fry and add the beans to the stir fry. And I'll often start off just, frying some onions and garlic, adding a little bit of cumin or even paprika or cayenne, and then adding the beans to it, and maybe a few other things, a few other stir-fry veggies, and that alone is great. A lot of them stand on their own with just a little bit of oil and seasoning, and you don't even have to do anything else, and that could be the centerpiece of your meal, and just have a side something or other with that.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that this amazing plant that offers so many benefits and is so tasty hasn't been so popular in North America?
Well, I really think that the main reason is that people haven't realized that relatively fresh, dried beans are so good, and that it's just this weird economic system that we have where we often export beans somewhere else, but we import the same beans from somewhere else, and the stuff that we get in the store is just really, really old, and that's probably more than any other thing why they haven't gained popularity.
Mm-hmm. It's the gas factor.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else you want to share with listeners about pulses today?
I do want to say it's been remarkable for me this year, even before my book came out and this big deal about it being the UN Year of Pulses. All of a sudden, starting this seed season for me in December, January, when everybody starts seed orders, all of a sudden people are ordering way more pulses than ever before, way more, and I don't know why that happened, but obviously it means that people are indeed waking up to the power of pulses.
Mm-hmm. The title's great. It's Pulses, a plant whose time has come. But it has come around the world, right? For people around the world have been eating them for ages.
Yeah, and continue to do so. And they're the main meals in a lot of countries.
And where can people find your book?
Probably the easiest would be Amazon. There are stores in California that have purchased it, and stores would order it. So the best would be to just Google it and find some source, or just ask your local store to order some in.
And it's The Power of Pulses, Saving the World with Peas, Beans, Chickpeas, Favas, and Lentils. And really, saving the world, that is a big claim to make. And you're saying saving the world just because of can you explain one more time why you think these pulses can contribute to saving the planet and us?
I'll give you a bit of an aside, because the United Nations and also the World Watch Institute has come out recently in the past few years saying that the number one cause of climate change is actually animal agriculture. It's not the cars, it's not the coal, it's our diet. And when you factor in the poisons that we put to grow the other crops, the fertilizers, the transportation issues, the processing, and everything involved with the way we grow food these days, that is the number one cause of climate change. And nobody is willing to address that. I mean, the UN did and World Watch did, but on the political level, we just had a big conference here in Canada with our new Prime Minister. He gathered all the ministers of every province together in Vancouver here just lately, and they're pretending earnestly to address climate change, and our diet was never mentioned. And yet it's well known by a lot of sources that, hey, that's definitely one of the reasons why climate is gone wonky. And that's what I'm saying, that these simple, beautiful, nutritious, versatile crops are the way we should go. They just, instead of incurring a debt in terms of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions by the way we grow food now, these are the very best crops to go in the other direction, because simply by growing, they increase the fertility of the soil instead of all these weird ways we try to do it. They just have an amazing thing going for them.
And it really is empowering, even though things are so daunting right now, environmentally and here in the States politically. But it's really empowering for people to know that that is a place where they have a choice and they can adopt a more climate-friendly diet. And that really, if many people did that around the world, we can turn things around.
Well said, Jill. I mean, that is so important, that we have it in our own power to help change things and to start moving in the direction of stabilizing the planet instead of making everything more erratic and extreme.
Well, it's been so wonderful to talk with you. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your seed company or your work with plants and seeds or pulses?
Pulses are definitely not the only thing that we offer. We have about 700 different things, and it's really important to grow a diversity of crops. And that's one of the things that I always say, because given that climate change is so extreme now, you never know what's going to make it in any given season. These pulses are certainly very adaptable, but it's good to grow a whole range of crops so that if it gets too hot, or it gets too hot and cold and hot and cold and hot and cold, or the rain doesn't stop or doesn't start, then there's always going to be some crops that will be able to help you out in times of crisis.
That makes sense. So you're not dependent on one thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And this is just an aside, but you also are doing work on a seed sanctuary, I believe.
I started that in 2002, and I wanted to, I've always been trying to keep seeds in the public domain, and you never know when the big seed companies might get heavy on the small seed companies and make it difficult for them to even supply seeds to anybody. So I've had this nonprofit going, and for many years, up until a few years ago, we were practically the only people in Canada that had a network of seed growers and evaluators, and we were maintaining quite a sizable bank of seeds that we would make available for people, to our members, for just a minimal lifetime membership fee. And it worked really well. We got to know a lot of plants and built up a sizable gene bank. But what's happened in the past few years is the whole idea has caught on. And all over the United States and Canada now, there are seed libraries and seed sanctuaries and seed banks and people doing it locally. And it's fantastic. It's just, in Canada here, we also have what are called Seedy Saturdays, and they happen in practically every village and town and city in the country. And it's a once-a-year thing. People get together, and the seed companies have seeds, and people trade seeds. And you have a lot of seed swaps like that in the U.S. too, but I don't think you have anything like our Seedy Saturdays. But you have a lot more seed libraries.
I love that Seedy Saturday.
You haven't heard of it even?
No.
Yeah, it's a big thing. It's been going for 25 years now here in Canada, but all of a sudden there's just there's probably 125 Seedy Saturdays that happened in February, March, and April.
That's great. Good idea. I'll pass that on to my friends who run the seed swap here, which is a yearly thing.
You probably just don't call it Seedy Saturday, but it's probably very similar. People get together and trade seeds and information about the seeds.
Again, another way to empower yourself. It's just that feeling of like, I have all this food that I'm going to be able to go home and grow just from getting together with friends.
Yes. And there's a great book called Seed Libraries by a person named Cindy Connor, which really has all the information you'd ever want about how to organize your own seed library or seed swap.
And then, Dan, one last question I had was, what do you enjoy most about working with plants and farming and seeds? What are the things you enjoy most?
Well, for me, there's an intelligence in the plants that most people don't talk about, and it's incredible. It's hard for me to describe because it's something that I experience daily, and you have to be there and have a lot of observation. So much about gardening is observation, but after a while you get to know and understand plants in a way that just confounds people who think that it's all scientific and it's all about what we do. And in many ways I feel I'm just the custodian of these seeds, and I'm dedicated to that inherent intelligence in the plants. It's quite remarkable what I'm still learning as even after 30 years about how amazing plants are.
Mm-hmm. I know, me too. I love them. Well, this has been so wonderful to talk with you today, and thank you for all of your phenomenal work over the years.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.